and that Grandma had left her Czech village for Vienna and somehow gotten a job as a seamstress for the royal family of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and that Grandpa, having fought for 4 years on the Russian front for the Austrian army in World War I, immigrated to America because he didn't want to fight for those goddamn Germans anymore. Well, when my mom died about 10 years ago, we found in her stuff Grandma and Grandpa's original work permits from the old country. The permits were issued in 1910, but all the addresses were in this ornate old Czech cursive in fountain pen that I could not decipher. So when I went to take a Czech class in Brno in 2019, I took along the work permits. I stopped in Göteborg, which was the one town that I could read in the work permits. Göteborg was the region that Grandma and Grandpa had grown up in. I was hoping that someone in Göteborg could help me identify their villages, but I got there late. The library was closed, the information center was closed. I was out of luck. So I got in my car and I, for some reason, took one last look at those work permits. Could that R maybe be an M? I plugged in the M, and lo and behold, the village of Klomek appeared on Google Maps 10 kilometers away. I drove through some beautiful, hilly, forested country on a one-lane road. It was dusk when I hit Klomek. A woman was burning leaves on the edge of town, and the smoke and the dusk made the town very spooky feeling. There were about 5 houses on the main road. At the last house, a couple guys were chatting, so I pulled up and I said, "My grandpa lived here 100 years ago," and then I showed him the permits. Well, they could read the permits, but they could only speak in Czech, and I think I understood him to say that there was a Marek around there, and he had a cabin maybe in the hills, but he could also read from my grandma's permit the name of her village, and it turned out that it was only about 5 miles south. I drove there, but it was dark, so I drove on to Brno. The next weekend after class, I rented a car and headed north. Saturday, I spent hours in cemeteries looking at markers. I spent at least 2 hours driving around Grandma's village with a fellow that spoke no English, a helpful old fellow spoke no English. We stopped at many houses of very, very old people, none of whom spoke English and none of whom recognized the names on the permits. One of the houses was straight out of a Russian village. Animal droppings and chicken shit right up to the doorstep. Then I went back to Klomek, but it was raining and no one was around. So pretty well defeated, I headed to Hlinsko, the nearest bigger town. I was ready for a beer. I walked from my hotel to a restaurant. Inside, people were celebrating and festive, and one guy, well-dressed guy, waved at me and he said, "Point the doll, point the doll." Come on in, as friendly drunks sometimes say. Well, the server told me it was a private party, but for some reason, I went over to the guy and I put my arm around him and I told him I'd love to stay, but they won't let me. Well, he recognized my broken Czech and asked why I was there. When I told him my grandpa was from Klomek, he got all excited. Klomek, Klomek. I thought I had said something wrong, but it turns out that his wife grew up in one of those 5 houses in Klomek. We called his wife, and she said there were still Mareks about 2 kilometers away in a village called Kremenica. So the next morning, I headed to Kremenica. I wasn't terribly optimistic. I thought I'd probably end up talking to some more old people in Czech, and I would barely understand any of it. I knocked on the door. Marek, Deve Barak. Deve Barak. Well, I thought that meant two houses, so I went around the corner and knocked again. Marek, Ano, Marek. A redheaded woman about 50 took charge of me. She could speak broken English, and she took me in the house and got her grandmother, a woman in her 80s. Well, it turned out that this family was named Marek, but they were not natives of the village. But the old lady remembered another family of Marks that had run the hospital, the bar restaurant that had closed decades ago. The son, now an old man, lived in Prague and used the hospital as a cabin. His mother's name was Marek. And then she said there is another sister. Umjela, dead? Asked the redhead. Ne Umjela, said the old lady. The sister, Amelia, now in her 80s, lived in a village about 10 kilometers away. I drove into a beautiful village tucked into a river valley. I stopped at a house where a guy was literally chasing chickens out of his yard with a rake. I asked him where Amelia lived. He pointed next door. As I went through the gate, an older woman literally stuck her head out of the window and looked at me. I asked, Amelia Tadi Bidli? A pleasant but confused smile radiated, and she invited me in. In just a few minutes, we were able to establish in Czech that her great-grandfather was my grandfather's brother. She then called her son Petr, who spoke perfect English. When Petr arrived, he was a spitting image of my godfather, one of Mom's distant cousins. Well, Petr told me that there had been another fellow there just a few months before that had been doing the same thing as me. When I'd been talking to Amelia in Czech, she said something about papers that I could not understand. And as Petr and I were talking, she was rummaging through her drawers. Then Amelia set in front of me a sheaf of papers. It was a family tree. I paged through and recognized the names of some of my mom's relatives in South Dakota. And then I turned another page. Albert and Irene Petrick, America, 8 Deti, 8 children. I pointed at that entry and said, Matka, Matka, mother, mother. I talked for another hour or so with Petr and Amelia, and they were able to hook me up with Joseph, who was the guy who actually wrote the family tree. Maybe the biggest miracle of all is that the family tree covered the families of both my grandmother and my grandfather. Other Marks and Simples had married over the generations, and Joseph was a descendant of one of those other lines. So his family tree covered both of my grandparents too. Well, I had knocked and many, many people had helped me, and my whole heritage had opened up before me. All I needed to do was walk on in. Point the doll.
Oh, John, I love that because my son and I are working on my ancestry and getting the family tree. So that was very interesting. Thank you for sharing. That's why we're going back to Portugal next year to do my Portuguese side of the family.
Yeah, that is so exciting. How old were you when you did this?
Last year.
Last year?
Well, right before COVID, 2019, I did it. Yeah.
What a thrill. Oh my gosh.
And what an amazing addition with the violin or viola, whatever that happens to be.
Yeah, that was great. That was excellent.
That is really special. And I think many of us, at least our age group, can relate to that ancestry thing. I have a very similar story, and just took me right back to it.
Yeah, the violin was great. It made me feel like I was walking down the street with you.
That was absolutely wonderful. And what a wonderful wagon you hitched your star to. That's such a great story. Thank you for sharing he
Right.
and she. Now mix me a color that nobody knows and paint me a country where nobody goes.
Sorry, Joyce. You're muted right now. Sorry.
I couldn't hear.
Yeah,
You're
you're muted.
muted.
There you go.
No,
There.
we
No,
don't hear
there.
you.
There
We
you
don't
go.
hear.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we
Okay.
missed the poem.
Okay, let's try it again. Now mix me a color that nobody knows and paint me a country where nobody goes. And put in it people that are something like you, watching a unicorn drinking the dew. We've had so much variety so far, various stars, but they've all been good. Now, a few years ago, we had a fellow named Al Zagolski that joined our group, and we got a bonus with Al. We got Adele. And I would like to tell you that my friend Adele, when I asked her if she would tell, she pleased me greatly that she is going to tell. And she had a special request. So please give a warm welcome to Adele, Al's wife.
Thank you. I don't remember special. It's interesting that you talked your poem. I couldn't believe it because the first thing I thought about with magic was unicorns and a unicorn jumping over, a rainbow colored unicorn horn jumping. And then I realized that wasn't going to work. I don't know anything about unicorns and I don't even believe in them. And then you talked about another country. And when I thought about I actually had, for me, a magical experience, and it was last year, because magic is sometimes something that's new, something that's exotic, something that's unknown, unfamiliar. And you talked about a country just now, and I went to Bali last year. I came back at the end of January, just a few weeks before COVID started and we were locked down, so to speak. And it was a magical experience. And I thought I'd spend a few minutes talking about it. It was kind of funny how it happened because back in maybe November that year, before, my sister-in-law called me up and she was looking for someone to travel with her. Now, I've known her for 50 years. She was going through a difficult time emotionally. But in the 50 years, I've never gone anywhere with her. Al and I never traveled with her and her husband at the time. And to be honest, Al doesn't have the best relationship. It's somewhat strained. So I couldn't imagine myself going off anywhere with her. So then I couldn't say no. Joyce said, I said, yes, I have trouble saying no. So she started, so I didn't want to say no, which is how I felt. I'm not going anywhere with you. But she started talking about it. And she said, it's a wellness trip to Bali. And they do yoga, meditation, healthy eating, everything that I'm interested in. And so I started to think about it. Maybe this would be a good idea. So I said, send me the information. And I looked at it and it was getting more and more appealing. I've always been interested in traveling to the exotic, Southeast Asia sounded amazing. So I said a few words to Al expecting, but he said, is this something, you really want to do? And I said, I don't know, maybe. And he goes, well, then you should go for it. Wow. Al surprises me sometimes. I really didn't expect that. And so I started thinking about it. And I thought, why not? And I realized it's really a big trip, and I've never taken a big trip like that myself. But I thought about it, and Bali's in the Pacific, and my sister-in-law is on the East Coast. I'm on the West Coast. Obviously, she would come to the West Coast, and we'd go together. But no, Bali is so far away that whether you leave from the East or the West Coast and then travel around the world, it takes the same amount of time. And so I was going to Bali by myself. It's beautiful, Bali. It is far though. I left San Francisco on a Friday night. I was at the airport at 10 p.m. I arrived at Bali 8:30 on Sunday night. So that's like about 2 days. It was 23-hour trip, not counting customs, waiting at the airport, and a 3.5-hour drive to the first resort. But the one good thing, if you travel so far, I found out I was always reluctant. It never occurred to me to go any place this far away. Your body is so tired, it doesn't really matter. You don't have this time. You're just ready to go to sleep and fine. So I arrived there, and I wanted to just show you a few pictures because I think that kind of says something. So I'm going to share my screen. Just yell if you don't see it. This will take hopefully 2 seconds, 2, 1, and here we go. Whoops. Uh-oh. There you go. Can you see that? Hello?
Yes, it's beautiful.
Okay, so this is the first resort I stayed in, and if you'll see, that's a hut. That was our hut that we were in. It did have electricity and running water, no air conditioning. There were monkeys somewhere and all kinds of insects and whatnot. But every tree, I mean, this is a tropical paradise with temperatures running about 80 to 90 and humidity about 80%. So comfortable you're not, but the beautiful flowers and trees and fruits of every kind. This is the group. Ironically, the group of people that went, this was a tour company, and there were 15 people who went, except for me and Bev, my sister-in-law. Everybody came alone. It wasn't a single trip, but they all came alone, and these were people from all over the world: Australia, Canada, England, Ireland, Cyprus. In the background, you'll see on this picture is a temple. And, you know, when I thought of Indonesia and I thought of that area of the world, I thought spiritual was Buddhism. But as it turns out, in Bali, Indonesia is like 17,000 islands, 600 inhabited. But in Indonesia, 87% of the people are Muslim. In Bali, they're Hindu, but they're Balinese Hindu, which means Hindu with a Balinese flavor. And I'll come back maybe to that. Here I am doing my yoga. I did get to do yoga most days, or many days. Whoops, sorry about that. And I was overlooking the jungle or the rainforest, and I was practicing a tree. Here's yoga at the beach. We did get to do yoga at sunrise. I'm sorry, let me get this thing right. Yoga at sunrise. And here we go is yoga. This they called, that's me, anti-gravitational yoga, where they have ropes hanging from the top and use silk ropes, and you get in all these contraptions, and it was amazing. Most of the people on the trip did not do yoga, and they all managed to do this stuff and had a great time. This was our lesson in one of the Balinese customs, which they take these various leaves and flowers and they make this little basket. This was my basket, which you'll see in front of all the stores and houses in the morning and every place you go. And it's like an offering to the gods. And they often put in food for people passing by and people who need it. Here I am, and we're almost done. Here I am at a water purification ceremony, a water purification event. That's me, but I wanted to show you, this is what it looks like. There's about 20 faucets, and the water is coming out, and you put your head under each, except for the 10th and the 20th. Those are reserved for the dead people when they prepare the dead. So we didn't go under those. And here I am just standing in front of a temple. Many of the temples were on the water sometimes, so you could approach from the water or by land. And this is just an idea of some of the beautiful, amazing, I don't know if you remember on the temple, a beautiful artwork often related to their temples. And their temples are used, they're very much involved in their religion. And here we get to the end. This was a fruit basket that was in my room on the first day and introduced me to what became my favorite fruit. You see this fruit in the middle? This is called a mangosteen. All right. And let me show you a close-up of the inside of the mangosteen. You can open it with your hands. That white stuff here is the fruit. And the mangosteen is sometimes called the queen of fruits. And some people have said it's like a cross between a strawberry, a pineapple, a lychee, and a peach. It is, let me get back to you guys. Whoops, sorry about that. Let me get back to you guys. And I fell in love with that fruit from the first day I was there. I fell in love with that fruit, the mangosteen. It is the most amazing fruit. Many of my fellow travelers were busy trying to book massages. Balinese do a great job with massage. And although I did try a massage, I wasn't looking for one every day or whenever we had free time, but the rest of my group did. I often would go to the shops and look to see if I could buy some more mangosteens. I guess the rumor has it that Queen Elizabeth offered £100 sterling for a mangosteen. I thought for sure I would be able to find mangosteens when I returned here to the States. But upon doing research, I was rather disappointed. And I told Al we need to go back to Thailand. They grow all throughout Southeast Asia, but they need temperatures between 75 and 90, humidity of 80% or 50 inches of rain. They die in drought. They die if it's under 45 degrees. And needless to say, nothing in the United States is going to work. So, but like other fruits, they can be found here. Unfortunately, with COVID, I haven't been calling around. And I was disappointed when I tried a dragon fruit at a local store once. Nothing compared to when you get them fresh. So I am going to have to think about going back. It was a great trip, and coming back to and going by myself, and every day I would sit on our vans and talk to people from all over the world, and seeing we're just a small part where we are now, and everything else around us. It's just amazing how the exotic becomes part of your life and how you can integrate it in. And coming back now to that unicorn, I can imagine the unicorn jumping over the rainbow, looking for a mangosteen. Okay.
Adele, I so
Thank
enjoyed
you.
the story.
I can't wait to go to Bali. I'm going.
It is hot and humid.
And take the humidity.
I enjoyed the photos, and
Yeah.
and
Nice.
especially the fruit. Boy, I want some of that. Can you, besides the white, can you eat that oranges?
No, the only part, it's a sweet sour taste. I forgot to say, it's a sweet and sour at the same time. It's juicy, but it doesn't run all over you. It is just the best fruit. It has been referred to as the queen of fruits, along with one other fruit that grows in Southeast Asia.
But it's only that little white part that you eat though, right?
Yes, you eat the white part, and inside the white part, some of the white sections have a pit, which is the size, maybe like an inch big. You don't accidentally swallow it or anything, but it is the most, I just couldn't get enough of them. Of course you can't bring them back. And in order to be sold in this country, they have to be irradiated, because in 2000, they were illegal. They were legal to have here till 2006. And because of the Asian fruit fly. So now you can have them, but they have to be irradiated. And they're very fragile. They don't like, they're not going to last for 2-3 weeks till they get here. So it's I heard 99 Ranch has them sometimes. I might give it a try. I could buy a dozen on Amazon for $90. And I have no idea how they would be. Al says it's cheaper than going to Thailand. I don't think so. He wants me to have a mango steam party.
Al, you need a star. Thank you. That's
welcome.
wonderful. A variety of stars to be followed. But now I have to change a little bit, because sometimes, you know, we have good. In order to appreciate the great, you have to have something on the other side also. So hold fast to dreams. For when dreams go, life is a barren field, frozen with snow. I always look forward to the great stories of our next teller. His stories are woven and built on a structure of truth, fleshed out with imagination and creativity. I can't wait to hear his story tonight. Please welcome David Tarbin.
Hey everyone, it's good to see you. So this is my story. I was sitting in my car and I was waiting. The engine was running and I was waiting. The heater was on and it was blasting and I was waiting. After a while, it just got too hot in the car and I shut it off and cracked the window just a little bit, and I looked up into the sky and I watched the gray hills rolling and rolling across the sky. I looked down at the ground. It was all wet with the rain that had been there an hour before. And I waited. And as I sat there and I waited, I could not help myself. I began to think about her. I thought about the first time that I saw her. You see, every morning I take a walk. I walk out of my neighborhood. I walk up one block. I walk back, and then I walk down to a shopping center. I come in from the back and I go through the shopping center, and then I go up this big hill and come back into my neighborhood. And the first time that I saw her, she was sitting at a bus stop. As you go into the shopping center, there's 2 bus stops, one on each side of the street. And she was just sitting there. She was obviously homeless, but not so obvious. She wasn't a typical homeless person. She was very clean cut. All of her clothes were immaculate. Her hair was done, and her little rolling luggage bag was all nice and neat and tidy, and she just was sitting there at the bus stop. And I would see her every morning. She would sit at one bus stop or the other, and I was always just mildly curious. But then I started to really kind of wonder about her, because you see, she just wasn't a typical old street lady. I mean, I've seen a lot of them in the last 20 years. She's in her late 50s. She's about the same age as my girlfriend. And she just doesn't, she looks like a professional, and she's always clean. And this one day I was walking, and as I walked through the shopping center, there she was. And that was the first time I got a close-up look at her. It was 7 o'clock in the morning, and she was splayed out over this metal bench, and she was fast asleep. She wasn't drunk. There wasn't any bottles there or anything like that. She was just asleep with her little rolling luggage thing there, with her jacket and her scarf. And it just amazed me how well she looked. But when you looked closely, You could see her face was weathered from all that exposure of being outside all the time. I finished my walk, and a couple of days later, I was out on my walk again. And this time, my girlfriend, the angel Melody, was with me. And we were talking and chatting, and all of a sudden, I saw her. I could see her off in the distance. We were about a block away, and this time she was sitting behind a pharmacy, and behind the pharmacy is this little access road thing, right? And she's sitting on a curb. And from that day forward, that's the only place I ever saw her. And as we were walking, I came up to the corner, and there was a cardboard sign, like kind of cardboard sign that homeless people show up asking for money, that kind of thing. And it was on the sidewalk, so I picked it up. I was just going to toss it into the empty field there. But I just happened to look at it, and I was shocked. I can't tell you what the first sentence said. It's just too explicit. The second sentence said, "I am desperate." The third sentence said, "I will do anything." And the last sentence, scrolled across the bottom, said, "I am Russian." Well, I knew it was that woman. So I walked by, and then I walked back, and I dug in my wallet, and I don't usually carry cash, but I had like $8 in there. I just gave it to her, and I just waved it at her, and I said, "For food." And I gave it to her, and she said, "Thank you," in her broken English. And then she started sputtering some other kind of stuff that homeless people always say to you when you give them money or food or water or whatever. And I just kept on walking. But I always watched for her, and I always would notice where she was. Well, 10 days ago, I was out on that walk. And I was walking along, and there she was. Now I'd started carrying change in my wallet, you know, a 5, a 10, something small just to give her so that she would have food. I mean, at least I hope she would buy food with it. And I walked up to the corner, there she was, and up the street like a block was a black Crown Vic just sitting there, blinking the lights at her. And she was a little bit psychotic. She would walk up towards the car just a little bit, and she would wag her finger like that. And then she would point like, "Come down here, come down here." And so I just waited for a couple of minutes till she kind of calmed down. And she went and sat back down on the curb. When I thought, you know, she was chilled out enough, I walked over there and I pulled out a $10 bill, and I started walking up, and I held out that $10 bill with my hand. But when she got up slowly. She was hunched over, and it took her a while to straighten up as she walked towards me. And you could see that she was in some sort of pain. But I really didn't pay that much of attention. And then she reached out to take that $10. And when she did, she looked me right in the eye. And in that moment, the sun that happened to be out had this glint all over her face from the sweat that her face was covered in. I looked into her bloodshot eyes, her red rimmed eyes, and she stifled a sniffle, and she took that $10. I immediately panicked. I took 3 steps back. I took a sharp breath. Nobody has the flu in 2021. You got flu symptoms, you got COVID. She started to mutter, "Thank you," whatever it was, and I just turned around and I kept walking. But with each step, I became more and more nervous. I'm high risk for the COVID. My age and my physical condition, not good for me. So I'm cautious. I am overly cautious. I totally isolate. I pick up my groceries, my meds, my whatever. I don't go out of the house except to go for that walk. So by the time I got home, I was kind of panicked, and I wasn't quite sure what to do, who to call. So I did what everybody does in the 21st century. I Googled it. And it said that, you typically two to 5 days before symptoms show up. So I thought, well, I'll wait a couple of days and I'll call and I'll figure out how to get a test. So I waited till Monday, and just by happenstance, the doctor called me. And so I said, hey, I got to get a COVID test. How do I do that? What do I do? And they said, just come here. That's how I was waiting in the car. And I sat there for a long time waiting, and finally the clerical person came out and I cracked that window. I gave her my medical card. I gave her my debit card. She brings it back. And I waited and I waited and I waited. And soon a nurse comes out and she's fully covered in all that gear. I open the door. She sticks that swab deep into my nasal passage. And I said, when will I get the results? And she said, 2 to 5 days, maybe. She said, everybody's backlogged. So, but 2 to 5 days, probably. So I went home and I sat there and I wondered. I wondered about her. I wondered what happened to her, what brought her here. I'm sure at some point in her life, she thought, I'm going to hitch my wagon to the star called America. But where was her family? Is she a mother, a daughter-in-law, a somebody? Who knows? She's on the street and she's too young to be like that. It just was it was actually, it was too much for me. But I couldn't help but thinking about her. So I had to start getting busy. And so I started cleaning the house, cleaning. I even cleaned the outside windows, the windows outside my house. And finally, 2 days later, I get a phone call. I was so busy, I didn't pay attention and I didn't realize it. It was the doctor. And they said, hey, we got your test. I thought, what are you talking about? I haven't had a blood test done. He said, no, it's the COVID. It came back negative. You're good. Well, a wave of relief just washed over me. I just sank back into the couch right there. And I just felt relief. I'm good. I'm good for now. Soon I'll have my vaccination and I'll be reasonably safe. But then I started to wonder about her again. Because you see, I still do my walk every day. But since that day that I gave her that $10, I haven't seen her. What happened to her? Is she in the hospital, intubated, being treated for COVID? Is she lying dead in a field? COVID kills people sometimes 2 days flat. I don't know. I don't know that I'll ever know, but I know I'll always wonder.
Thank
Very
you.
powerful. Very powerful.
Very
Dave.
powerful.
Yes, definitely.
Some people don't have a star, and when they do, they don't hook a wagon to it, or it's a false star.
Yep. Well done, David.
A lot of
Well
people
done.
out there in that shape, man.
Yeah.
A lot of people out there like that. It's
There
really
is.
sad. Driving on the freeway the other day.
David. David, I like
Yeah.
how you added in all the COVID pieces of you in there. I'd heard that before, but I like that addition.
Thank you. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
just
it's
for
terrible.
storytellers, hey, I used a story clock to lay out that story. You might want to Google that.
Story clock, oh, good. Nice.
We're doing well. We're ahead of schedule. Well, when I grow old, I hope to be as beautiful as Grandma Lee. Her hair is soft and fluffy white. Her eyes are blue and candle bright. And down her cheeks are cunning piles of little ripples when she smiles. Now, Ed Lewis is not going to be a Grandma Lee. Ed Lewis going zooming all over the world. Storytellers, he goes everywhere. Statewide, nationwide, worldwide. He is our ex-president of our guild. He belongs to SAC, the Storytellers Association of California, and he's very active in the national storytelling. So he's not going to grow old like Grandma did. He's going to zoom it all the way through, zooming and leaping and hopping forward to every storytelling Zoom
Event.
event. No, I'm talking about the little thing you plug in at the top. I've had more than enough trouble with technology this week. Please welcome our own Ed Lewis.
Thank you. I've had the chance, and I would recommend any of you to do this. For 2 weeks, I've been taking a 2-hour class from Noah Baum, Baum, and she does lots of different classes, and I am learning so much. And one of our assignments is we had to take an instant in our life and then develop a story around it. So I started doing this story, and she kept saying, "What's the purpose? What's the purpose?" And what I was doing is just telling a bunch of cool episodes, but it didn't seem to have much of a purpose. So I'm going to experiment with a purpose tonight for that particular story. I was surrounded by my shoulda, coulda, woulda baseball teammates when I crossed home plate with the winning run that won the city championship for a group of guys in their 20s in Los Angeles. I was the man. Afterwards, we all went out for drinks, and we're talking about all our adventures, and everyone's trying to find out what our careers were, because we were a ragtime bunch of people that were from parks and city recs all over the city, just got together. And I told everyone, I said, "Yeah, I'm a preschool teacher." And then I got the weirdest looks. Preschool teacher? It was the same look that I got from my father when I graduated with a degree in business and told him that I was going to follow my passion and work with preschool children and help them develop their learning potential and follow their passions. My father said, "All right, son, are you gay now?" "No, Dad, I'm not gay. I just have this passion, this feeling that to really work with children. The business world just seems too cut and dry for me." He said, "I hate to tell you this, son, but you cannot make a living as a preschool teacher. And you need to get married. You need to have a wife that's going to stay home with your children. And you don't need to be doing women's work." I got the same reaction from my true love's father, Vicky. Vicky and I went to a university in Mexico for a year. And she lived in Ridgefield, Connecticut. And we had plans to get married after that year. She was actually going to come out to California. And I had my bilingual teacher credential, and she flew home to Connecticut, and I drove all the way up visiting old Army buddies, got up to Connecticut, and her dad was a judge and her mom was a lawyer. I don't know if you know about Ridgefield, Connecticut, but it's a very wealthy community close to the mansions in Rhode Island. Well, they lived on this large estate, and I came to their dinner table the first night, and this was this long, cherry polished table, and Dad sat at one end, Mom sat at the other, Vicky and I sat in the middle, and her brother sat across from us. He looks at me and he says, "Well, son, my daughter seems very smitten with you. How are you planning to care for her, provide for her with the high society values and lifestyle that she's accustomed to. Well, sir, you know, I just got my bilingual teacher credential, and my plan is to become a preschool teacher in a migrant farm camp for the immigrant kids that come across the border and work, their parents work the fields. He shook his head. He looked at Vicky and he said, "You brought me another one of those?" Well, Vicky ended up marrying the vice president of the Hilton Hotels in the Bahamas and had a very great life. I have another story about that. I met her 32 years later, the Virgin Islands, at one of her resorts. Well, but the question was, I came back, I got my degree in human development. I got a job as a preschool teacher in a college lab school. But I had this little nagging thing in the back of my head. Am I really a man? I mean, am I really, something's wrong. Maybe something's wrong with me. But I did all these manly things. You know, I worked on my car. I played baseball. I worked construction during the summer. I tried to do all those manly things, and I enjoyed them. It was great. And even as a child, I was totally self-sufficient. My parents had a boat, and I was an only child. And we'd go to these islands, and my parents would let me take my dinghy out, and I had a 1.5 horse Johnson motor on it, and I'd just go exploring. I'd catch fish, I'd cook my own food, I could camp out for the night. I often met other boys, and they'd come along with us. We were totally self-sufficient. Of course, we sucked up our pain because, men don't show pain. And, I was doing all those manly things. And then I got drafted in the Army during the Vietnam War. And I became a weapons specialist. So I went through the military. I was a real man. I was a man. At least I was trying to convince myself that I was a man. But why was I choosing this career path? And anyone I would tell was this kind of look at me askance. Well, during the summertime, when I had time off, I would go on these adventure trips. I went after the military, I did 2 years of backpacking around the world. I lived in a cave in the Canary Islands for 6 months off the land. I traversed the Sahara Desert. I think I was trying to prove something, right? I went on a sailboat up through the Mediterranean. I camped in the Pyrenees Mountains. I was doing all these manly things. And then I came back to California. And when I had that job, I would do my summer trips. And I love adventure travel. So I had planned a trip to go up the entire length of the Amazon River and end up in the Andes Mountains. And then I would hike the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu and so forth and so on. So I had 3 months to do this. Now, after 2 weeks, I hopped on a cargo boat, and we went up to the Amazon, these amazing little villages and port cities. I met these fascinating people, and even though they speak Portuguese in the Brazil side, most of them spoke Spanish, and I was very fluent in Spanish. So I met this cargo captain, and we were in the middle of the Amazon. The big city is Manaus. And Manaus, in the late 1800s, was the wealthiest city in the world. It was a rubber baron capital. And I had many interesting adventures through that town. And I did one of my favorite things was to go to the opera house. They had a world famous opera house. It's just opulent. It's unbelievable. Of course, I wasn't going to tell any of my guy friends I went to the opera house. I got on that boat again, and the captain said, "I'm going to drop you off in Leticia, Colombia. You just have to check out this place and go see John Wayne." John Wayne, the real man? Yeah, John Wayne's there. What you do is I'll drop you off, you walk through customs, you go up the little dirt road, and you'll come to this clearing, and you'll see John Wayne. All right, so I did that. I walked up the clearing, and there was a couple, a young man and a woman in their 20s that got off the boat with me, and they were interested in this little exploration also. So they're from Minnesota, and then we came to this clearing, and there is a saloon, an old-fashioned saloon from my childhood, from John Wayne. There's a hitching post out in front, the swinging doors, and sitting on this rocking chair was John Wayne. We came up close and John Wayne stood up and he came down the stairs. He had on this pinched cavalry cap. He had on a white shirt with pearl buttons that went down the front. He had this ragged old, I don't know, tan vest. And he had these leather pants that were dusty, dirty, and they were held up by a pistol belt with 24 bullet slots. And in that pistol belt, he had 2 Colt 45s that were from the Billy the Kid era. And supposedly they were called the Pacemaker, and they're what won the Wild West. And there he was, and he looks at us and he says, "Howdy, partners. What you doing on down here in my jungle? I haven't seen people like you around here for a while." He said, what's this, kind of older guy and this other guy and this beautiful young lady? What are you doing here? And I said, "John, I just had to see you. I got on my stallion in Mexico, and I rode all the way down here to see you because this miner told me that if I could meet you, you knew where all these gold mines were, and you could take us to these riches, and I would become rich and famous." He looked at me, he said, "Son, with a comeback like that, you deserve one of my good shots of whiskey." And we went into the bar. The bar had this old Western bar. It was about 10 feet long, and it had 8 bar stools in front of it, a long mirror, animal heads all over the entire bar, and there were 5 poker tables. And on 4 of those were definitely tourists, older people. They were old folks in their 60s and 70s. And in the middle were 4 cowboys and a cowgirl. Cowboys had, 2 of them had Winchester rifles, and 2 of them had double-barrel shotguns. They all had a pistol, a revolver in their belt. And the woman, all she had was an 1897 replica, a Marlin replica rifle, because she was Annie Oakley. And they were sitting around pouring down shots and talking, swearing. Everyone was just watching them, right, from the whole area where the dance floor was. And then John Wayne came up and said, after we had a couple shots of good whiskey, good rock gut whiskey, really, he said, "All right, folks, come on outside. The Wild West show is just about to begin." We headed outside. We sat on these hay bales around behind the saloon, and they put on a show, bareback riding, gun shooting demonstrations. Annie Oakley leaned in, she was bareback, side saddle. She'd be shooting her rifle at these targets dead on. And John Wayne challenged me to a shooting competition. I had been a weapons specialist in the Army, and we did a long distance shooting competition, and I won, and I knew that I was a real man. Well, there's many more adventures with John Wayne. I mean, he was German, and he had come from Germany right after World War II. He was a poor farmer. I mean, his family were poor farmers, and they had to flee the Russians when they came over. And he was about to get out of there after World War II, and he came to follow his dreams and his heart. He always wanted to be John Wayne, and he came into the Amazon and worked in mining camps, saved money, and then he eventually started the saloon. He had a hotel, he had a tour company, and then I went on some amazing tours with him, but that's for another time. But one thing he told us was, he said, you guys, you just have to follow your dreams. You have to do what you know is right for you. Do not let anyone tell you what you have to do with your career or with your life. Follow your heart, follow your dreams. And I came back and I became a preschool teacher for 10 years. Then I taught college for another, early childhood education for another 17 years until I retired. And, I was faced with that limiting stereotype of a man being in a woman's career, the stereotype that, there must be something wrong with me. But because with people like John Wayne in my life and other good friends, I had the worldview that I could do whatever I wanted to, and I could still be a real man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that one's a totally true story. All of it's really true.
Well, I can relate, man. As a registered dietitian, I can totally relate to that.
Oh, that
You know-
was very funny. Well done, well done. I especially like, Ed, how you used your movement coming in and out of your, in the frame of your picture every time when you said, and I'm a real man. That really was effective every time you came forward to
Oh, thanks.
emphasize besides your voice. Very well done.
That's what I'm trying to learn more about, how to use this Zoom. And the other thing is, I probably did some of it, but I tend to flail my arms all over the place, and I'm really trying to work on that.
No, you kept them fairly well within the frame of the, at least my tablet. You kept
Okay.
your hands fairly well within the frame of my tablet.
Yes, you're becoming a very refined storyteller. I can
Thanks.
see that. I can see that.
Ed, your story reminds me, talking about stereotypes, this is a little embarrassing, but I was a school teacher. I was teaching kindergarten, and my principal, who I loved, came and said, well, we have a new special ed kid, a special ed teacher coming. He comes from the Boots to Books program that the military has. I said, well, who is he? I said, oh, I don't know. He ran McClellan Air Force Base. He was the top general or whatever that was. Oh, I said, I'm not knowing much about military. I said, and then I saw him in a distance, 6'2". And I said, what in the Sam Hill are you thinking? You're going to take a military man, 6'2" or whatever he is, and you're going to give him to help my 5-year-olds? I was mad. I said, what are you doing? Why did you hire him? And he said, don't be so opinionated. Well, I was opinionated, because one of the first things that happened is one of my 5-year-olds, who I found out loved him, ran up and grabbed him and gave him a hug right around the knees, which had him toppling right over because he turned out to be one of the best special ed teachers I'd ever dealt with. And that goes to tell you, I had a stereotype of what a military man was going to be like, and I was dead wrong.
Yep.
So, dreams go fast and far these days. It seems like only one rule really applies. They will not fly except in open sky, a fenced-in dream will die. Well, now I'd like to welcome another storyteller, and his story, this Andy is currently a gentleman farmer, a writer, a storyteller, a poet, and in 2014 he started writing brief single-page stories about his life experiences. Well, these turned into 183 stories, which he has now collected and published in a book about American experiences. I'm sure you'll see the reward of not fencing in a dream when you listen to Andy's true story. Andy?
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Joyce. I appreciate that introduction. So the title of my story is called Triumphant Soccer Team. And but before I get into that, I wanted to talk a little bit about a concept of decision making. Decision makers, either a person or a group of people, sometimes make decisions based on subjective data. They make decisions about people they influence based on subjective data or political data or political criteria or whatever. And a lot of times, the decisions they make about people have a very lasting effect. They can say, this person over here, they're really bright, they're really talented. We're going to help this person get to the top. We're going to promote this person. That person is doing well, right? Their self-esteem is high. But then, based on the same subjective criteria, they can say, this person over here, that person just doesn't cut it. The consequence of that decision might be devastating on that person. They may just think themselves an incapable person, unqualified, and never recover from that. But what they have to remember is that there's always going to be other doors that they can open. So keep that in mind when I tell you about this story called the Triumphant Soccer Team. My wife is a soccer nut. She has been playing soccer for over 30 years, and she started when she was over 30 years old. So you do the math. She still plays soccer now. Every year she plays soccer with the over 30 league for women. She has instilled a great appreciation of soccer into me and into my two children. When our kids were 5 years old, they were already playing soccer. And it was so cute. They were playing little bunch ball, when they first started out. The whole team follows the ball along the soccer field, and they're running this way, they're running this. It's just so funny. It's a blast to watch. My son Javier, I coached him for a while in soccer, and my daughter was coached by Nancy. And they had a wonderful time. My daughter then, Amanda, by the time she was 11, she wanted to do more. She wanted to, at this point they were playing competitive soccer, and she wanted to play, they were playing recreational soccer, and she wanted to play competitive soccer. So she had to go to tryouts. So my wife took her to tryouts. There were probably 200 kids there, but there were only spaces for 180 or something like that, 170. So unfortunately, there were 30 kids that did not make the cut. This group of adults up here, whether they were using political criteria or subjective information, did not allow 30 of the kids to make the cut. Really, it was unavoidable. 30 kids couldn't make the cut. But nevertheless, a lot of the kids were on the teams because they were there last year, and it really wasn't based on objective criteria. So the kids that didn't make the team, well, they were considered rejects. They felt like they were rejects. The league thought they were rejects. The parents wouldn't put up with it. No way. The kids were angry. The parents were angry. So the parents went to the board, the people making all the decisions at the top. And they said, what gives here? This is really just not fair. So they said, okay, great. You find 2 coaches, and we'll give you another team. Well, not only did they find 2 coaches, they found 3 coaches. 3 parents stepped up to coach the new team. So they got the team together, and thankfully Amanda made that team. So she was on the competitive team, and we were very, very excited about that. The three coaches they were very confident coaches. They told those kids that they were not rejects. They told those kids that they were as good as all the other kids. And they were very rigorous with their training program with those kids. I mean, they had sometimes 3 practices a week. They were training them for endurance, they were training them for strategy, and they were training them for ball handling. They were excellent coaches. And they really went through a full-on training course with these kids. And now these girls accepted all of that without any problem at all. They were angry. They were furious that they were put on a reject team, and that the league thought of them as the team of rejects. No one had any high expectations for them except the coaches. Anyway, the time came for the games to start, and they were excited. First game came, they lost. Oh, it was terrible. Second game came, they lost again. Twice they lost. The first time lost worse than the second time, but nevertheless, they still lost. The coaches really had their jobs cut out for them. They had to keep their morale high. They had to convince them this is not their fate. They are not a team of rejects. They said, we're going to practice one extra time this weekend. We'll see how that works. So they did. The next game they won. Not only did they win that game, but they won every other game that season. So by the time they came to the end of the year, they were the number 2 team playing the number 1 team in the championship game. Incredible. Now, I never went to my daughter's games because I cheer too loud, and that makes her uncomfortable. So I never went. But there was no way I was going to miss this championship game. We drove 20 miles away down to Vacaville, cold day, to watch the game. Game started. They're playing. And our team was called the Fury because the girls were furious, right? So the Fury wasn't making goals. And finally, the number 1 team made the goal. 1-0. Doggone it. And it's halftime. It was 1-0. So the kids, they were a little demoralized, but not too bad. Second half starts. 30 seconds into the second half, boom, the Fury makes a goal. It was just great. So exciting. So they kept going. And then shots miss. And finally, the number 1 team, boom, they hit another goal. It's 2-1. And man, they were just cheering, and they were really trying to do their best to demoralize the Fury team. Well, the Fury team, they were getting angry, and they were getting kind of muggy faced, but the coaches were telling them to keep their chins up. So they kept fighting, and boom, 2-2. 2-2. Fury 2, number 1 team 2. There's still hope. There's still hope for this team. They didn't want a tie. They wanted to win. They wanted to get rid of this stigma of being a team of rejects. They're going at it. 3 minutes left of the game. The person guarding my daughter tripped and fell. Someone passed her the ball, and boom, into the net it went. 3-2. It was 3-2. Fury was ahead. 3 minutes left. It was the longest 3 minutes of my life. The teams were just going at it. The other team was really mad, and they really wanted to fight. So they're down at our goal, and they're kicking the ball, and they're screaming. And finally, we cleared the ball a few times, and I was cheering. And finally, the game was over. The Fury won. Woo! No longer a team of rejects. They proved everybody wrong. The girls didn't have to win in order to prove everybody wrong. But at 11 years old, this had a huge impact on my daughter. She and all the rest of that team who went through that other open door, thankfully, proved themselves, proved that the higher-ups who called them rejects were wrong. That lesson took my daughter clear up through high school, clear up through college, and now into her career. It's a lesson that every kid needs to learn. Thank you very much.
I remember those soccer games because my husband was a soccer coach for my daughter and son too. So
Yeah.
I can understand where you're coming from, Andy.
Inspirational.
So I got mixed up though. So your daughter wasn't picked as the first 130. She was part of the reject one.
Yes, she
Okay.
was.
Okay, I got mixed up there. I thought she was on the
No,
other team.
no, she didn't get picked. Yeah, true story though.
Yep.
True story.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Great
Andy.
story. Am
Thank
I
you for
muted or
listening.
not muted? I can't tell.
No, that's all good. Yeah, you're
Oh.
fine. Thank you
Okay.
very much for listening.
Okay, great story. I have one poem left for you. Keep a poem in your pocket and a story in your head, and you'll never feel lonely at night when in your bed. A little poem will sing to you, a little story bring to you, a dozen dreams to dance to you at night when in your bed. So keep a poem in your pocket and a story in your head, and you'll never feel lonely at night when in your bed. Thank you to all my tellers that were on the program tonight. I think they did a wonderful job. Congratulations to all. Thank you for joining us today. And please join us again next month on the third Saturday, March 20th at 7 p.m. when Mark Berry will be your host. Mark, do you have anything you want to say to us about next month? I know Mark's there someplace.
Yeah, he's there.
Mark?
Yes.
I'll make an announcement until he gets on if he doesn't.
Okay,
Well,
Mark.
we're waiting. So the Storytelling Association of California has the genre storytelling every month, and we can nominate someone from our group for any of these events, and I'm going to tell you what's coming up. So, and it's the third Wednesday of the month. So in March, I think it's March 17th, where the focus genres are myths and fables. And then in April, it's historical. And in May, it's legends, urban and traditional. And then June is fantasy fairy tales. And July are humorous laughing stories. And then August, we go back, we start the whole thing again, assuming it's still happening, with personal stories. That's where we started before. So we have all these genres. All of you will get an email about this. You have to be a member of the Storytelling Association of California to be nominated. And if you're not, you should join it anyway. It's a great organization. And all the storytellers get the donation money. And the lowest it's ever been is $38 for each person. And last month it was $58. So, and the annual dues are $30. So, you know, your telling would pay for your dues if that's a concern of yours. And SAC has all kinds of great events going on. And you've seen quite a few of them. Joyce has sent them around.
Yeah, I got to participate in that. The last one was a lot of really good storytellers in the last one.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I do say so myself, since I was one of them. But just kidding. Just kidding.
Mark, do you have anything to tell us about next month?
Yes, Sir Lawrence asked me to host, and I gladly will. And I have 5 tellers at the moment. I have Ed and Dave and Angela and Andrew and Karen all present here and well known to us all. I do have room for 1 or 2 more tellers. So if you guys know of anybody, I have asked 4 or 5 people from the Auburn Guild, and so far nobody has taken up my invitation. So if you know of 1 or 2 people, I just put my phone number. I love text. I just put my phone number and my email in the chat section right here, live now.
Mark, give your theme. Your
I forgot.
theme.
I forgot. Anybody know what it is? I forgot.
I think
Careers, unusual careers.
Oh, that's
unusual
right, yeah.
careers.
Unusual careers. Yeah.
I hear
so,
Jennifer Rutherford is a pretty good storyteller.
Jennifer, can
Yes,
you?
indeed, dear.
Darling,
I
I
don't
don't
have
have
a- I
an
don't have a
unusual
contact
career. I
information.
wish. I have a very stereotypical career. But thank you for the compliment.
Did you want to tell Jennifer?
I don't have like Dave, I can't tell stories from work. I'll get in trouble as long as I still work there.
Okay.
But sometime in the future when I can fit the topic better than that.
All right. Well, after you're retired, you can tell us all the secrets.
You have no idea how much stuff I want to tell.
He works for the
Anybody,
he works for the CIA, you
Joyce
guys.
has my information. Ed has my information. Linda has my information. If you want to, if you know of anybody, send one of them an email. They'll forward it to me, or give me a phone call. My number's in the chat. So I'm looking for 2 good tellers. We got room.
Well, just to let you know that I also belong to the SARTA, which is Stage Actors
That mailing list?
Theater Association. And they are willing to put our information in their monthly newsletter they send out. So I'll be including that,
Great.
our program for next month. So
Well,
we might get a storyteller out of that.
Well, I would also think it doesn't have to be your own career. It could be an unusual career that you know about or someone in your
Absolutely.
family had, right? Yes, Mark?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And you just reminded me that my grandfather had some amazing careers. So
Yeah.
the spot with guest speakers, I can always take a spot myself. So
Yeah.
you're all welcome.
Well, thanks for doing it, Mark. We really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah.
Anytime, you guys. Love you all.
Love you too, man.
Thanks, Mark.
Yay.
Thank you, Joyce.
Remember,
You did it was a great listening to all those poems as introductions. They were really
Yeah,
nice.
Joyce.
That was excellent.
hit
Yeah, that
your
was
wagon
really-
to a
That was
star.
such a nice
Be
touch.
aware of
to
who
the-
you are, love yourself, and you'll go far. Hitch your wagon to a star.
Yeah,
Nice.
Thank you.
Well done,
Right.
Joyce.
perfect timing too. Did you notice the time, everybody?
Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect.
We're pretty good. I'm
Oh, yeah.
excited. Well, I'll see you all in a month if I don't see you sooner on the other
Bye.
programs that
Bye,
I'm in.
everyone.
Hey, guys. Take care.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Signing out.
Signing out.